So firstly, thank you for inviting me, and secondly, for making me feel so welcome. It's a pleasure to kind of get off the beaten path and see real Canada, and meet real Canadians. I stayed in one of their homes last night. It was fantastic. So you have to bear with me. This is a 7-minute speech, and it's important I get this right because it's important to me, as the UK and to the Air Force. So when the Second World War broke out in 1939, Canada was an ocean away from the scene of the fighting in Europe. But geographical distance did not mean that Canada would not play an important role in the struggle to restore peace. One of the first and most important contributions Canada would make to the war effort would be the leading role it played in delivering the critical British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. Canada was ideally suited for this programme because it was far from most of the active fighting, had lots of wide open spaces and good flying conditions. However, delivering the programme was an enormous undertaking. In 1939, the RCAF had only 4,000 personnel, less than a dozen airfields of its own, and training facilities for only 400 ground crew per year. Now, the RCAF was expected to train thousands. It had to recruit instructors, build air bases, acquire aircraft, and develop training schools for different specialities. By war's end, there were 151 training schools, and every province had British Commonwealth Air Training Plan installations. Canada was, in US President Roosevelt's words, the aerodrome of democracy. During the time of its operation, the programme employed over 3,500 aircraft, 33,000 Air Force personnel, and 6,000 civilian employees. And the Government of Canada built 7,000 hangars, barracks and drill halls for the air bases and training schools. Just imagine any country attempting this now, even with the benefit of modern technology. Training in the programme was challenging and rigorous. Pilots, wireless operators, air gunners, air observers and flight engineers went through months of training at specialised schools. It is important to note here that the average age of recruits was between 18 and 24, with the majority not yet 20 years of age. The risks and sacrifices of those serving their country during the Second World War were not limited to those serving and engaged in active fighting. Training could be hazardous, as demonstrated by the 856 trainees who died in crashes during the programme's 5 years of operation. But it wasn't just serving airmen that sacrificed. Civilians played an important role in the programme, providing instructors for flying training schools, community support for young men who were far away from home, often for the first time. Bush and commercial pilots joined as instructors, working side by side with military personnel, and civilian flying clubs were initially entrusted with the organisation and operation of the elementary flying training schools. Helpfully, many of their members had served in the First World War and provided an immediate source of skilled manpower. Civilian instructors in elementary flying training schools emphasised safety. Working under the maxim, there are old pilots and bold pilots. There are no old, bold pilots. Some flying clubs paid for the entire cost of their training school using private funds or community donations. In Vancouver, citizens paid for 14 training aircraft out of their own pockets. Such was their commitment to the cause. Women's organisations ran canteens, sports organisations supplied athletic equipment, and service clubs provided items like pianos for barrack halls. And to cap it all, many people like you in the audience invited trainees into their homes for meals as a patriotic gesture for their personal involvement in the war effort. For anyone like me who watches the singing of the national anthem at a hockey match here in Canada, it is clear that this patriotism remains, and that Canadians of any background and heritage would indeed stand on guard for thee. Needless to say, the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan was an outstanding success. To reiterate what Al said earlier, by the end of the war, it had graduated a staggering 131,000 pilots, observers, flight engineers, and other aircrew for the Air Forces of Canada, Britain, Australia, and New Zealand. As the Government of Canada Veterans Affairs website wisely states, knowing about our country's military history helps us to understand the Canada in which we live today and how we can build our future. What a great quote. As we all face the next existential threats to our way of life, such as climate change and global insecurity, it is useful to reflect on what we achieved in the past to inform what we can achieve together going forward. It is easy to think that nothing like the Second World War could ever happen again, when in fact there are parallels to what is happening right now in Europe. As some of you may be aware, over the last few weeks, around 200 Canadian soldiers deployed to the UK to join an alliance of nations now training Ukrainian civilians to become army recruits, soldiers. Again, together we stand. Further, a UK P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, one of which carries the name William Barker VC, as mentioned, a Canadian First World War pilot ace and Victoria Cross winner, who was born here, is for the first time visiting Canada this very weekend. Whilst here, the British crew will train with both Canadian Air Force and Canadian Navy, as our nations continue to work closely together to maintain international peace and security. We should therefore remember the shared endeavour of the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, not just out of respect for the brave young souls who made the ultimate sacrifice, and for the many who put the needs of their country ahead of their own, but also because it reminds us of what we can achieve together. I have one final thing to say. Thank you, Canada. We will not forget.